In today's video, we'll be sharing a story from the anime film Hotarubi no Mori, also known in English as To the Forest of Firefly Lights. The movie begins with serene shots of a misty forest, eventually revealing a young man sitting atop a rock in the middle of a lake. This man, as we later discover, is one of the film's main characters, Gin. The scene then shifts to our female protagonist, Takigawa Hotaru, as she prepares to leave for her summer vacation at her uncle's house. Her mother reminds her to listen to her uncle, double-checks that she has packed everything she needs, and advises her not to daydream to avoid forgetting anything. Hotaru, however, reassures her that there's nothing to worry about. After all, she has been visiting every summer. Despite her confidence, her mother still fusses over her, even insisting that she wear a hat, which Hotaru casually refuses as she steps out the door. As she arrives at the bus stop, a smile spreads across Hotaru's face as memories flood back. Memories of when she first met Gin, the very reason she eagerly awaits summer each year. The story then takes us to a flashback from when Hotaru was just 6 years old. She recalls how she got lost in the sacred forest of the mountain god, a place where spirits are said to dwell. Exhausted from wandering in search of a way out, she had curled up on the grass, tears streaming down her face from fear and loneliness. Suddenly, a voice called out to her, addressing her as Shorty. Startled, she looked around and was relieved to spot a young man with silvery hair and a mask peering at her from behind a tree. With cautious concern, the man asked why she was crying. Overjoyed to see another person, Hotaru ran toward him, believing she was saved, only for him to swiftly dodge her, causing her to stumble face first onto the grass. Apologizing, the mysterious man explained that he couldn't be touched by a human, or else he would vanish. Confused, Hotaru questioned whether he was not human, to which he replied that he was a being who resided in the forest. Piecing his words together, Hotaru concluded that he must be one of the spirits. Yet she remained curious. What did he mean by disappearing? Hotaru, still curious, repeatedly tries to touch the mysterious man, but he skillfully evades her every attempt. Eventually, growing frustrated, he picks up a stick and lightly hits her on the head to make her stop. He then explains that a spell cast by the mountain god prevents him from being touched by a human. If that happens, he will vanish completely. Since he cannot hold her hand, he offers her one end of the stick, using it as a way to guide her out of the forest without direct contact. Overjoyed by his kindness, Hotaru instinctively tries to hug him in gratitude, only to be met with another tap on the head from the stick. As they walk together, she cheerfully remarks that it feels like they're on a date. Amused, the man asks if she isn't afraid. When she innocently asks, "Afraid of what?" he simply says, "Never mind." When they finally reach the exit, he instructs her to walk straight ahead, and she will find the mountain path. As he bids her farewell, Hotaru hesitates and asks if he will always be there and if they can meet whenever she returns. However, he warns her not to come back, as the forest is dangerous, and she could get lost forever. Ignoring his warning, Hotaru eagerly introduces herself, but he remains silent. As she turns to leave, she calls out that she will return tomorrow with a thank you gift. Just as she walks away, the man finally speaks, revealing his name, Gin. She quickly turns around, but by then he is already gone. The scene then shifts to Hotaru's uncle, who had been searching for her. When he finally finds her, he scolds her and gives her a light smack on the head for worrying him. Overcome with emotion, Hotaru bursts into tears and clings to him. As they walk home, she curiously asks her uncle if spirits really live in the forest. He responds with a story from his childhood, how he and his friends would venture into the forest, hoping to catch a glimpse of the spirits, though they never did. He then recalls how he and his friends once had fun at a summer festival deep in the woods. However, since the villagers never held festivals in the forest, they later came to believe that they had unknowingly stumbled into a festival of the spirits. The next day, Gin was taken aback to see that Hotaru had actually returned. Hotaru, delighted to find him waiting, excitedly ran toward him, attempting to hug him once again, only for him to swiftly tap her on the head with a stick, exclaiming that she never learns. Gin then invited her to walk through the forest, mentioning that it would be cooler in the shade compared to the scorching sun. Hotaru eagerly agreed, and as they strolled through the woods, enjoying their snacks, she suddenly noticed a dark figure lurking behind a tree. The eerie figure spoke, addressing Gin and asking if he was with a human child, then ominously inquired if he could eat her. Frightened, Hotaru quickly hid behind Gin. In response, Gin calmly stated that she was his friend. The shadowy being then issued a warning to Hotaru. If she were to touch Gin's skin, he would devour her. However, Gin simply shooed it away, revealing that the creature was merely a mischievous fox spirit known for transforming to scare people despite being harmless. As they continued walking, Hotaru curiously asked Gin why he always wore a mask. He brushed off the question, telling her not to worry about it and instead share more about herself. Realizing that he was genuinely interested in her, Hotaru felt happy, knowing that his curiosity was the reason he had waited for her. A montage follows, showing Hotaru returning to the forest every day to spend time with Gin. One day, Hotaru found Gin lying on the grass, seemingly asleep. Curiosity got the better of her, and she wondered if she could touch his mask. Gently, she reached out and removed it, only to be surprised. Gin looked just like a normal human. As he opened his eyes, he calmly explained that he wore the mask to appear more like a spirit. As they walked out of the forest, Hotaru informed Gin that she wouldn't be returning the next day since her summer stay at her uncle's house was coming to an end. Gin then asked if she would come back next year. With a bright smile, Hotaru reassured him that she would. The scene then transitions to the following summer, fulfilling their promise to meet again. As they explored the forest together, they encountered a tree spirit. The spirit expressed concern for Gin, warning that spending time with a human child was dangerous. Gin dismissed the warning, insisting that it was fine. However, the spirit still reminded Hotaru not to touch him. As they continued walking, more spirits emerged from the forest, repeating the same cautionary words. After several summers pass, we see Gin searching for Hotaru, unaware that she is trying to startle him by hanging upside down from a tree. However, her attempt fails, and the two end up chatting instead. During their conversation, Hotaru playfully asks if Gin would take off his mask from time to time. Amused, he agrees. Just then, the branch she is holding onto begins to crack, and she starts to fall. Instinctively, Gin rushes forward to catch her but stops abruptly. He knows he cannot touch her. Fortunately, Hotaru lands safely in a bush. Looking up at Gin, she pleads with him never to touch her, no matter what. Overwhelmed with emotions, she begins to cry. A few summers later, Hotaru has grown into a 5th grader. When she visits Gin, he comments on how she is starting to look more like a young woman. Smiling, Hotaru confidently tells him that she is a woman now. It soon becomes clear that Gin's aging process is far slower than a human's, and as time passes, their age gap seems to shrink. After spending the day together, Gin removes his mask, allowing Hotaru to see his face once more. She gazes at him silently, as if trying to memorize every detail. Later, back at her uncle's house, she lies on the floor, deep in thought, realizing that someday she will be older than Gin. As her uncle invites her to eat watermelon, he casually mentions that this winter is expected to be especially cold, cold enough to freeze even the mountain god himself. On the last day of summer, Hotaru visits Gin one final time before returning home, giving him a scarf to keep him warm through the winter. The story then shifts to Hotaru at school during the winter months. She sits at her desk, lost in thought. Outside, as she walks with her friends, one of them grabs her hand to keep her from slipping on a patch of ice. This simple act of contact stirs something within her, an aching longing to see Gin again, and more than that, an unspoken desire to touch him. Meanwhile, in the forest, Gin is shown wearing the scarf Hotaru gave him, a quiet reminder of their bond. The next scene brings us to Hotaru's return to the forest, now as a high schooler. She confides in Gin about her plans for the future, telling him that when she graduates, she wants to find a job near her uncle's place so she can spend more time with him. Hearing this, Gin realizes that the time has come. It's time for him to tell her more about himself. Gin finally opens up to Hotaru, revealing that he is neither a spirit nor a human anymore. He explains that he was abandoned as a baby in the forest, left to die. However, instead of perishing, he was found by the spirits. The mountain god, taking pity on him, cast a spell that allowed him to continue living, but at a price. If ever a human were to touch him, the spell would break and his body would disappear forever. He gently tells Hotaru that it's okay to forget about him, reminding her of his fragile existence. But Hotaru shakes her head, reassuring him that she thinks about him all year long, even when they are apart. She then makes a heartfelt request. She asks him never to forget her. Knowing that time will eventually pull them apart, she pleads that they stay together for as long as they can. Moved by her words, Gin invites Hotaru to a special summer festival held by the spirits. Now that she is older, he believes she won't be frightened by it. He asks if she can sneak out of her uncle's house that night, admitting that he has wanted to take her there for a long time. Though a little nervous, Hotaru agrees. Gin reassures her that the festival closely resembles human festivals, as the spirits designed it to mimic them. When they arrive, Hotaru is astonished to see spirits disguised as humans, blending in seamlessly. Gin mentions that, on rare occasions, real humans wander in, never realizing that everyone around them is actually a spirit. This reminds Hotaru of the story her uncle once told her about a mysterious summer festival. Since they cannot hold hands, Gin ties a cloth around both of their wrists to keep Hotaru from getting lost in the crowd. Laughing, Hotaru teases that it feels like they're on a date. Gin smiles and softly replies, "We are on a date." They spend the evening enjoying the festivities, cherishing every moment together. But soon, their time at the festival comes to an end. As they walk along a quiet lake after leaving, Gin confesses something that has been weighing on his heart. He can no longer wait for summer to come around. When they are apart, he longs to see her, even if it means risking himself in a crowd full of humans. Hearing this, Hotaru gazes at him, resisting the overwhelming urge to reach out and hold his hand. Then, in a tender moment, Gin removes his mask and gently places it on Hotaru. Through the fabric, he presses a soft kiss against it, a silent declaration of his feelings. He tells her to keep the mask, and in that instant, Hotaru is struck by the thought that this might be their last time together. As they continue walking, two spirits pass by them. Suddenly, one of the spirits stumbles, and without thinking, Gin instinctively reaches out to catch him. Before the spirit falls, Gin instinctively catches him. At first, everything seems fine. But when he turns back toward Hotaru, she notices something horrifying. Gin is staring at his own hand as it begins to fade. The truth becomes painfully clear. The boy he saved was not a spirit in disguise, but a real human. Realizing that these are his final moments, Gin turns to Hotaru with a gentle smile. He opens his arms and softly calls out to her, telling her that, at last, they can touch. Tears streaming down her face, Hotaru runs to him, throwing herself into his embrace. For the first time, they hold each other. No barriers, no hesitation, just pure and unspoken love. But their time is cruelly short. As quickly as they find comfort in each other's arms, Gin's body begins to dissolve. Hotaru clings to him tightly, unwilling to let go, but within moments, he disappears completely. Left standing alone, Hotaru slowly lowers herself to the ground, overcome with grief. In that silent, heartbreaking moment, we hear their voices echo, both of them softly confessing their love for each other. As Hotaru leaves the forest, she holds Gin's mask close to her chest. One by one, the spirits appear around her, offering their gratitude. They thank her for spending time with Gin and, most of all, for giving him the one thing he had longed for, a human's touch. Though the pain of losing him is deep, Hotaru finds solace in the memories they shared. She knows that, no matter how difficult the summers ahead may be, Gin will always live on in her heart.